Harold Steve. He was the first one. Yeah, that just was like last year. Somebody called. He got by somewhere.
Okay, thumbs up, gentlemen. Just give everyone. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Brian Kanopka. I'm a director here at ICE. I'm also a proud former chef, restaurateur, and entrepreneur. But I also consider myself very lucky to be a lifetime student. Now, if you think about it, everyone would love to be the smartest person in the room. But I would argue it's much better to be wise than it is to be smart. If people say a smart person will very quickly learn from their experience, but a wise person can learn from others' experiences, all right? And that's why I want to introduce you to this panel today. Hopefully, the next hour, we can all find this wisdom mindset to learn several things from these very experienced gentlemen. So please, quick round of applause. Okay, first, the distinguished gentleman to my left is Keith Treball.
Hello, everyone.
Keith is a Bronx native who has spent over 35 years owning and operating food and beverage venues. His long list of openings spans a variety of cities, both here and abroad. New York, Las Vegas, Miami, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Osaka, Japan, just to name a few. His entrepreneurial spirit is evident with the launch of his own consumer product called Cane Simple Sugar, one of the first liquid sugar brands. Keith balances the heart of a creative, having graduated from the School of Visual Arts here in Manhattan, with the business chops of a top-level executive, previously leading well-renowned brands such as BLT Group and Sullivan Street Bakery. Please welcome Keith Treball to the panel. Next in line is George Constantino. George is a lifetime food entrepreneur and Borough of Brooklyn business protagonist. An NYU alumni, George's passion and marketing savvy have garnered 7 successful food brands, a ghost kitchen operation and packaged food company called Miti Miti Foods. A lifetime learner and, interestingly enough, once an avid Peter Kump recreational cooking class attendee. George has lived and worked in Japan and speaks 4 languages, including English, Spanish, Greek, and Japanese. Yashimase. Please welcome George Constantino. And last, but by no means least, we have Jun Choi, a UNLV hospitality capstone graduate. At the start of his career, Jun played pivotal roles in restaurant groups such as Quality Branded and MGM Resorts International. Later, his position as director of restaurants at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, Jun oversaw collaborative partnerships with world-renowned brands, including Jean-Georges Management, Major Food Group, and Wolfgang Puck. A green belt in Six Sigma's strategic problem-solving system, Jun currently puts his skills to work overseeing Chef Daniel Boulud's 21 international restaurant concepts and counting. Please welcome to the stage, Jun Choi. All right, thank you, gentlemen. So here at ICE, everyone loves what we have coined ice breakers. Just to get to know you all at a fun and casual level, we have a series of quick fire questions. We'll start with Keith and work through George and then June. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
An early bird.
Both.
Both. Okay. Pivots.
With 2 babies under 2 years old, I have to be an early bird.
Early bird. Favorite form of caffeine?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Freshly brewed coffee.
Cold Guinness.
Didn't know Old Guinness contained caffeine. Okay, I know this is subjective to the time of day or maybe the meal you're having, but more often than not, is it red, white, or sparkling?
Red. White.
I'm gonna go with red.
Okay, 2 reds and a white. Okay, favorite condiment?
Mustard. Say sriracha.
It's the Thousand Island dressing.
Oh, yeah, you betcha. You're the
Right, in and out. So, it's
double
one of
double.
my favorites.
All right, just show of hands. How many srirachas do we have out there? Because I know that's a. Oh, we're not on trend here. It's supposed to be like 80% of the people. All right, favorite food city?
Tokyo. Say Tokyo also.
It's gotta be New York.
New York. All right. One New York and 2 Tokyos. Okay, if you could invite one person to dinner, dead or alive, who, pray tell, would that be?
Babe Ruth.
Babe Ruth. Okay,
Kurt Cobain.
nice,
Gotta be my father.
beautiful. Does anybody know who Kurt Cobain is? Okay. 3 people? You can only eat one food for the rest of your life. Just the one. What are you gonna do?
Spaghetti pomodoro. Tacos.
Cheeseburger.
All right. All right. We've handled some of the serious business. Now we'll get into some lighter content. All right, gentlemen, project yourselves back, please. First days out of school. What advice would you give your former self to make your path either less painful or more fulfilling than it already has been? Less painful or more fulfilling? Anyone wants to jump in? First come, first.
I'll jump in. Can you guys hear me? I can't tell if this is on. I would tell myself that it's all going to work out. You know, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't focus on the little things. It's all going to work out. You're a hard worker. You're quick to make decisions, and you're a people person. And I think, you know, it's all going to work out. I focused on too many things, you know, that I think took me away from the main goal.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you say, but it's also part of building who you become. How many nights you go home, taking home that situation you could have handled in the dining room 10 times better than you did. And you beat yourself up and you beat yourself up. That's part of like how you get to where those mistakes don't come back to you. So no, that's a very tough question about what you tell your younger self, because so much of it is built on the experience that you're living through day to day. Every day that restaurant door opens, you're going to be presented with a whole new set of problems. I don't care how long you've been in the business. You'll be surprised. Every time I walk through it, I'm like, wow, 35 years in the business, I've never seen that situation. That's pretty amazing.
To my younger self, who's about to graduate, take the time off, because there'll be plenty of work to do once you start working. So one thing I wish I could have done a little bit different, take a month off before you start pursuing your career and start growing. Because once you start doing that, taking a month off from your reality is quite difficult.
Yeah, good point.
So maybe a year abroad, get all your vacation time in at the front end.
Yeah, I did that. I graduated NYU and then just went to Japan for a year and a half. My parents were pissed, but it was something in Japan, and being in isolation really allowed me to focus on what I wanted to do when I would come back to New York. So that is great advice.
Now, we're all looking for inspiration, the books we read. So many chef authors, restaurateur authors out there. What was one of the more important industry-related books or movies that had an influence on your career?
I had to jump in. There's a book called 48 Laws of Power. The book talks about dealing with different personalities and the tactics and strategies being used over the last few centuries, all over the world, matter of fact. So that book helped me a lot to identify what's really important to me as a professional, but more importantly, as a human. And the things that the book taught me, I constantly use today. Speak with our business partners, my managers, or even, speaking with Chef Danielle. The book taught me a lot, so I recommend it.
I dug this book up. I brought it. Starting a Small Restaurant by Daniel Miller. This book is 40 years old. Back in 2001, I was a bartender and my best friend was a waiter at the same restaurant. And the two of us are like, let's open up a restaurant. We can do this. The owner wasn't doing the best job. We're like, let's do it. So we met at Barnes and Noble. And back then, there really wasn't like how to open up a restaurant for dummies book, or the books were maybe too technical. But this book had a lot of heart and soul, and it really talked about the ups and downs of what you would be getting into, the long nights, etc. And the author really spoke from a place of his pain and excitement of his business. And it's definitely been updated, but a lot of these main core features from 40 years ago are really relevant today.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was Setting the Table or Kitchen Confidential, but working the hours I used to work, the last thing I wanted to do was go home and read a book about the restaurant industry or watch a movie about it. I will say that understanding how important team building is in this industry and creating a winning culture within your restaurant walls, I've been most inspired, believe it or not, by like sports movies like Miracle about the 1980 hockey team that won the gold medal. Just movies that were built around the underdog, really figuring out a way with what at the time seemed like not the best components and building it into a winning team. So I always reference those things when I'm thinking about creating a restaurant. How do I get everybody in this room to believe in the same thing and bring us to a higher place?
That's the Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, he's my man. Love it.
We've all been involved probably with successful and not so successful concept. What's the most successful concept you've been involved with? And why do you think it was so successful?
I'll say BLT Fish for me. It was a special time in the city. The restaurant industry was a little bit different then. I was looking on the walls. You have the chef Amy Eubanks up there. I think about when we opened that restaurant, I think it was 2004, maybe 2005. Ended up with Michelin star, ended up with 3 stars from the Times. But the amount of people back then that we had sort of in the corral, in the bullpen. Mark Forgione was a line cook. Matthew Palomvino was the chef de cuisine. Amy Eubanks was, I think she was working saute. Just the amount of people. I had floor managers that have gone on to own their own restaurants. We had such a pool of talent. And I look back to those days and it seems harder and harder to get that kind of team. Maybe Danielle still does.
Incredible. For me, Le Papillon has to be the most successful opening in my career. So restaurant opened out of the pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty in our industry, right? People working from home and what's the future of the restaurant at that point. But we value 2 things, culinary innovation and the importance of hospitality. Going to the first year, the restaurant clicked into its own identity. Worked out great. Performance-wise, it's outpacing last year's performance, getting very aggressive towards the budget this year. And we have an incredible team. And I think if I could define what success looks like is having a very steady team that's working to create something amazing like that, such as Le Papillon.
For me, it's the same business was the best, was the worst, and then is the best. So my first restaurant, Bogota Latin Bistro in Park Slope, Brooklyn, right up from Barclays, opened up 18 years ago. So I waited 10 years before I opened up concept number 2, and I opened up across the street. So I wanted to do something different. I did global tapas. So back in 2014, 2015, I loved that food. My staff loved the food, but the neighborhood didn't really respond to it. I think people thought tapas small, and coming from my first Latin restaurant, they were expecting bigger portions. So my accountant and I sat down. My accountant's like, all right, you're only doing 18,000 a week in sales. You're losing money. And this restaurant was robbing from the first restaurant. And pretty much my accountant's like 18 months, we have to decide what we're doing, pulling the plug or change the concept. So that was around Halloween 2016, and it was a global tapas concept. My best sellers were fish tacos, lobster quesadilla, barbecue chicken nachos. So we're like, I've always wanted to open a Mexican restaurant. Let's do it. So I decorated the whole restaurant for Halloween, skeletons, Day of the Dead, and everyone loved it. The customers loved it. And sure enough, I never took those decorations down. They're still in my restaurant now. And this past week, we just did 104,000 in sales for this one restaurant. So imagine, like, my accountant was looking at me, and he represents top restaurants in the city. And he's like, who are you? Like, I've never seen this happen before, this turnover. So
100,000 a week, it's serious business.
pinching myself.
Well, thank you, George. You already answered the question for best and worst. What about concepts that didn't work, and any reasons why you think that was the case?
For me, I'd say the worst restaurant is still open, but it was Smith and Walensky in London. So we went into London market with the arrogance of knowing about steakhouses. Anybody from London or UK here? Oh, got it. What we recognized quickly after that is folks in London knew about beef better than we did in the stateside. So we had to pivot quite quick. And we underestimated the amount of clash and cultural differences of our task force members of the local the management team there. It took us a long time to turn the ship. And right now the restaurant's doing quite well. But if I would have done anything differently going forward in European market is doing the right homework and do it right.
Yeah, I agree with June. I don't think it was concept for us. It was the fact that we put the concept somewhere where it didn't stand a chance to work. We went into Dallas, and ownership was enamored with Roger Staubach was the real estate team that talked us into going down, and kind of promised us a decent build out. But once we got there, we found out, there were, number one, more seats in restaurants than there were people living in Dallas. Number two, the idea of Laurent Torrendell and myself going down there for a month, everyone came to me and said, who's your real estate agent? When are you moving? Are you already here? And saying, no, I'm sorry, we're just here for a month. What are you talking about? If you're not going to move to Dallas, you can't succeed. That type of understanding, it was brutal. I had the guy from Del Frisco's that was down the street standing outside the door of our restaurant. And it'd be like, June, you going into BLT tonight? So you don't need your reservation at Del Frisco's anymore? And people literally turning around. It was such viciousness. I think we lasted 6 months, and we were out. But again, this was one of those sweetheart deals. We didn't spend the time considering whether the concept would work. There were a ton of already famous steakhouses down there, and they said, we don't need a Frenchman coming down here to teach us how to cook a steak.
It wasn't that sweet of a deal. All right, what is the best advice for retaining people in organizations these days? Like Keith talked about, used to have a really deep bench that gave a lot of confidence for expansion. Now that bench is getting thinner and thinner, how do we get the people that are already working with us to stay for the long haul? Any best in class advice?
I can take that answer to start. So retaining talent is challenging at any level. So if you're entry level management going into the labor force, obviously you are very excited about your flexibility and your ability to create something new. Well, that's not what entry managers do in any organization. what you do as an entry manager is that you learn the culture, you learn the processes, and you learn how to do it right. And as you progress along into your career, your ability to expand that creativity gets further and further. So when you get it into a director level or VP or so on and so forth, you get to actually create an amazing product that what is based on your experts. So we recognize that at any level of employment under our organization now. And we teach that tool at all levels. So continuous mentorship is a key. FaceTime with every individual manager it's very a successful tool for us to retain that talent.
For me, in the beginning, I put more money in human resources than I did in operations because I really wanted to build a strong culture. We now have 154 employees. Every summer, we close all restaurants. I have 3 locations in Brooklyn, 1 in Jersey. We get together and we do a staff outing. For some reason, amusement parks is always wins out over the volleyball game or barbecue, but we've done amusement parks the last 2-3 years. Also, we do a Teamsgiving event around Thanksgiving where we close the restaurants early. We bring everyone to one location and get a DJ and have a good time. Also, we close Thanksgiving, we close Christmas. I feel like that's a big thing for the employees, just so they have their own work-life balance. And it goes back to, values, making sure the managers are on the up and up and doing what they should be doing. Everyone's treated with respect. And I think that really goes a long way. And it really builds a really good team morale and a good teamwork where people are there to improve the business and move it forward.
Yeah, for us, we created our own currency within the company at Fox. We literally created what looked like monopoly money. It was called Fox Bucks, and you can get it in different denominations. And we would incentivize people in the job, whether it was, something in the kitchen for no sendbacks for a week. Maybe it's on the floor, highest check average. So any of those ideas, you would get paid in bucks that you could spend in any one of the 6 restaurants. And if you earned $50, it was $50 worth at these places. So people actually got into collecting the Fox Bucks, and it was just a whole nother currency. It also helped us in the sense that you worked at one location, you go to the other location and you'd spend your bucks there. It created an understanding throughout the company. So at that level, that's what we worked on. At the management level, I try to engage all the managing teams. I want their input. And this travels down also to the servers and the kitchen. Give me some ideas. If I can get to embrace what they're telling me and incorporate it into the way we do things, they now have some ownership in the company because it's their ideas that we're putting to work. So I encourage you to get your staffs involved and let them feel like they're part of the process.
Thank you. A lot of the students want to know what goes into finding their first location, how to choose a location. There's, I would assume, some due diligence involved. I found myself standing out in front of stores with a clicker counting foot traffic. Any best-in-class ideas for how to go about picking a location? Is it all gut, or do you do some due diligence?
Everybody just pick. You got. They come to you, right?
No, that's not true. I mean, the Chef Danielle and Dynamics Group has, amazing presence in our industry. We still do our homework, right? Get the right partnership. We do a deep concept marketing analysis. What is that actually? What does the location need in terms of restaurant operations? So it's understanding the current trend and then overseeing what's to come in 5 years. Meaning Midtown, is they're looking for more of a casual concept or a fine dining concept. If you're looking at a downtown location, what is it? What does the labor force look like in 5 years? What does the economy kind of look like? What's popular these days? Is it going to sustain the popularity over the next 8 to 10 years? So there's a lot to go on other than gut check.
Yeah, I mean, my first location, I probably looked at 40 locations and got 40 rejections from different landlords because I had no track record. So I couldn't give up. And eventually someone took a chance on me, liked my idea, liked my concept. And to this day, 18 years later, I'm probably there. They have about like 20 other properties in Brooklyn. I'm probably the most long-term tenant that they've had. And I decided take a page out of Danny Meyer's book, and I opened up 3 soon to be 4 restaurants, all within a block of each other in Park Slope, Brooklyn. So I'm doing different concepts. Within that, I want to find my Shake Shack and then start expanding and going on from there. So now I'm looking to pretty much the vicinity of Brooklyn, but I have a 5-year plan of Williamsburg, maybe East Village, maybe Tokyo, maybe LA. So now it's time to, amp it up outside of Brooklyn.
Keith, any ideas?
The reason I asked you that in the beginning, June, is typically in my career, people invited us in. In a lot of times it was in depressed areas, they needed a known brand to be the anchor. And then they were going to use us signing a lease to get everybody else involved. So, we were never really courageous with
Well, you didn't have to be.
picking locations. My real quick favorite story was I had done a restaurant down in Puerto Rico with the GM of the Ritz-Carlton down there, and literally calls me up one day and he says, "Hey, can you come down to Aruba for a day?" So, okay. Brings me down, brand new Ritz-Carlton in Aruba, less than a year old, built $5 million restaurant, fish restaurant, total failure. He goes, "I have no money left. Maybe I can get you 200,000. What do you think about putting BLT steak in here?" And, I forecasted sales very low. And sure enough, we under promised, over delivered. And it was one of the most successful stories ever, just because, it's an invite into a failed situation. We find a way to make it work.
So there's opportunity out there for that type of restaurant. Even in Park Slope, you'll see a lot of turnover. Place they spend a lot of money on FF&E. It's kind of turnkey. Make a low offer, and maybe you acquire $500,000 worth of equipment for a song. So
Yeah, BLT Steak, the first one on 57th Street, was 3 failed restaurants before it was BLT Steak. Everybody said, "You're crazy. This is a bad location. It's cursed." Went in anyway.
I guess with that small budget to start with, it was worth taking a shot, right?
Yes, actually.
I think all of you have families and perhaps children, right? One question always comes up in this industry: is there such a thing as a work-life balance? If there is, we'd appreciate any hacks you've developed over the years to balance work with family life in the hospitality industry.
I think the short answer is no.
No, come on. Give us hope.
Industry that, my wife can work from home 3 days a week, and she's making twice as much as I make. She doesn't have to show up to get her job done. But in the restaurant industry, you have to show up. And I have never found a way to not have to be there. So I don't know how you can answer that.
I'd say for me, there are 3 factors that help me have a better work-life balance. In the beginning, it took us maybe, like I mentioned, I invested in HR. I didn't invest in other restaurant, management. So I was there 24/7. And after a while, I started bringing on management. I was a little still controlling, giving up, but I had twins in 2011. They're 11 years old now. So that helped me step back a little bit. Number 2, COVID helped me put things in perspective and step back a little bit. And, just really focusing on I would hire managers and chefs to do the job, but I would still be so attached to it. So let me pull back because, the whole saying, what does it work on your business instead of in your business, put that to reality. And number three, recently I got a divorce and I really needed to step back and be there for my kids and my own mental health. And that allowed my businesses to run without me. And I felt like that was a really good sign of, oh, this thing is running without me. Let me focus back on me, which is strange for anyone in this industry, restaurant owner with all these restaurants, to always not think about things. So it is possible. This is my year of getting back to myself and travel. And I'm actually opening a 5th restaurant in the next few months.
Work-life balance is there. It's possible for sure. I used to complain about the hours I put in as an entry level manager. And I spoke to an attorney named Dan Benson, very, very powerful lawyer. So I used to think anybody else in other industries did not put in the hours as we do. And he used to tell me, June, my associates put in anywhere from 17 to 18 hours a day. So that's when I learned it's not about prioritizing, well, I'm working this many hours and I have 2 days off. It's not that. It's so what you want to achieve in your current position and what you want to excel in. Because at that point, hours put into your work become secondary. The reward is a lot greater down the road. The second thing is bigger organizations like Fox or Dynex, we value as a currency, as a compensation. Listen, it's not about giving our employees an extra $5,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 annually. It's about how many weeks they can take off guilt-free, so they can completely detach from the work environment and come back to work recharge. Because if you don't do that, someone else will do it. Our competitors will do it and take our talent away. So I think for those who are about to go into the labor force, you're in a great timing to get into the industry because potential is out there, possibilities out there, and of course, working life balance also.
Thank you. Many would argue that sort of the legacy model is starting to show signs of breaking, right? We have rising cost of goods, rising labor costs, the real estate market's not getting much friendlier. So there's going to be this transition where a new type of model arises. People have tried things like ghost kitchens, direct to consumer, drone delivery. Any predictions for the future of food, what it takes to be successful?
If I jump in, I think the innovation technology started a long time ago, right? So back in 1950s, when TV dinners first came out, I can imagine what the chefs are talking about, the trend. So you fast forward 70, 80 years, yes, we're seeing in brick and mortar locations and more available to us because delivery app is around. I think in terms of creativity and innovation and actual craftsmanship, it'll be around for a long time to be done by human beings. In terms of productions, to a certain level, I think humans will still be involved.
Yeah, my thing I would add is the delivery apps are amazing, great technology, but they are killing restaurants. And I would love to see the future where restaurants unite and create a different technology to take down these apps, because these apps are charging, anywhere from, 25, 30%. And, restaurant owner still has to pay their staff, their food, and you're diminishing profits at the end of the day. And these companies, not only are they charging the restaurant, 20, 30%, they're charging the consumer 20, 30%. So they're making double. And I feel like restaurant owners need to unite and wake up, because eventually you're going to see a lot of places just really can't keep up. So I'm hoping, just like Resy and Yelp took down OpenTable a notch, because OpenTable used to be a monopoly. They used to charge so much money for reservations. They had to step up and be competitive. I'm hoping someone jumps in the game to help DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats become more competitive, because it really is. It's
ripe for disruption. Someone's got to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started working with Jim Leahy at Sullivan Street Bakery, one of the first assignments was, we were just coming out of the pandemic, and he was down to 5 employees in the middle of it, baking bread, but none of the restaurants were open that he was supplying, and he was barely staying alive. He said, the first thing I need you to do is create some lifelines for me. Because I believe there's going to be another pandemic, whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I want to be able to survive it better than I did this time. So, we thought about it, and one of our first approaches was the Fresh Direct. We started selling a frozen potato pizza, biscotti, a few different breads that worked. And it was such a thriving business already that we could not fulfill the demand in our current location just to supply Fresh Direct. And they're a company that if we all get locked down again, you're all going to be ordering from to deliver to your house. So it was those types of things that I still hear that in my head today, whenever I'm going into advise on a restaurant group or something of that nature. I'm like, okay, let's think, what else can we do besides, filling that seat and serving that guest? So yes, but, in a broader answer, I think Gen Z is going to be, they're the ones that are going to come up with the next solution. Our industry was broken before COVID, and people were saying, this model doesn't work anymore. And we were all trying to figure it out, whether it was self-serve, how to pay the chefs correctly. We never came up with an answer for that. At least I haven't. I've tried 4-day work weeks in the kitchen. We've tried everything. Somebody's going to come out with a solution, and it's probably sitting out here. I'm looking forward to it.
Any Gen Z? You guys have the solution?
Yeah, come on. So what do you got?
Everyone would love to know, what is the average day in the life of a person living at the top of an organization look like? How does your day start,
Not
Jim?
at the top, right? I can tell you.
Close enough.
Good. My average day is understanding the performance of each venue yesterday or last week, to have an understanding of where we're going this week or this month or this quarter. If there's any pressing topics that I need to connect with GMs or directors, executive chefs, I prioritize that to suppress any further issues coming up. It's not like we have a lot of issues, but if needs to be a movement to click the restaurants to realign it, that's the priority day to day. Connecting with our CEO, who's a dynamic individual, Sebastian. Jokingly, we say, please don't go on vacations, because when you come back from a vacation, you come back with a deal, and I have to make it work operationally. And one-on-one with Chef Danielle is very important, because that gentleman has an ocean of knowledge that occurred over the few years, probably 30, 40 years. So learning from him day to day, I have to make sure that I fit it into my schedule. And most importantly, connecting with our regulars every day on the floor, so they're satisfied everything. For those who are willing to give me the feedback, I dedicate the time to listen to them. Because what scares me the most is for those who don't give us the feedback and never come back to our restaurants. So I make sure that fit into our daily schedule.
Thank you. Day in the life.
I'd say it's taken me 18 years to get to this place, but I used to be the host, the manager, fill-in bartender, busboy, food runner, expediter, chef, marketing guy, and eventually I hired people for those roles. And by the way, my two favorite positions in any restaurant are the host dealing with a crazy crowd and an expediter dealing with crazy tickets. Those, for some reason, work well for me and my mind. I'm still the bookkeeper of my restaurants. I'm ready to give up control in every area except money. Because that's, you hear stories, but I'm still the bookkeeper, which may not be the most efficient thing, and I'm also still the curator of the playlist in my restaurants. And, I may be a little out of touch, and my staff always wants every reggaeton song, they want 10 Bad Bunny songs, but I'm like, no, there needs to be variety. So I love 70s, 80s, 90s, and I love the music of today. So right now, my role is making sure the employees are happy, so I'll go in and make sure people are good, and then I can make a few phone calls. Hey, this needs fixing, or this needs that. So it's almost like an undercover boss thing with my priority on my employees' happiness, because they're the ones representing me when I can't be there.
Thank you. Keith, what's a day in the life?
Okay, so my day starts at 6 a.m. Get the kids off to school. I'm in the office by 8 a.m. I'll go restaurant by restaurant. I'll look at last night's sales. I'll break it down by category. I have my own way of keeping track of all that. Then I'll look at a labor report. And then I take those two things and I put it into the weekly projection for that restaurant and say, okay, how are we trending this week? And I get all that done usually by 10 a.m. so that when my managers start to show up to work, I can call them on the phone and say, hey, it's Thursday, man. We are 20,000 below our projections this week. What can we do to get back on track, or are we going to get back on track? Whether it's letting the hostess go a couple hours early, it's covering here, it's cutting there, whatever it is, we kind of strategize that. But then I'm like, June, once the afternoon hits, get myself into the restaurants, at least 2 a day, and spend my time there. First, I start with the employees before we get busy. I make myself available to hear what they have to say, and they usually have a lot to say. And then it's the guests as they come in. But I will say I'm done by 7 and heading home by then. I'm trying to work 5 days a week, but there's often a lot of 6-day weeks. And again, I've gotten to the point in my career where I take Easter off or I take Thanksgiving off, but a lot of my life we were in the hotel business, and that was a 365. So that's my work week. Hopefully 5 days a week, 8 to 7 at night.
That's one of the businesses more difficult than the restaurant business I've heard is the hotel business. And if you want to work a lot of hours, become a lawyer, for sure. Okay, I have one more question for the panelists. And if anyone has a question, please just raise your hand. And I think Abby's going to come around with a microphone and she'll find you so that you can ask your question. Now, I know some of you, or I'm not sure, but how many of you have family that were in the restaurant business?
My father started with an International House of Pancakes out in Westchester. So I was washing dishes by the time I was 12. That's how I came up through the business. I did every single job possible. And then my daughter was a manager within Danny Meyer's organization for a number of years before she stepped out and she decided to have kids. And now she's a school teacher. But yeah, it's been through my family forever. So
Anyone else follow family into the business?
No, I followed because my mom and dad are immigrants. My mom's from Costa Rica. My dad's from Cyprus. He's Greek. They met in English school in New York City. My mom had all these boyfriends after her, and she went for the Greek guy because she thought he was going to have a Greek diner and he was going to be rich. My dad ended up being a tailor. So as a kid, my mom would say, you'd be better off if your dad opened a restaurant and had a diner. And she nagged him and nagged him. I was like, Dad, don't worry, I got this. I'm going to open up a restaurant one day. So I could say I got here because of my mom's nagging. You know?
So growing up with a traditional Korean father, last thing you want to tell him is, hey, Dad, I'm going into a restaurant business. I had to get into the business and really fought hard. But fortunately, I met my wife in the industry, who's sitting right here, actually, attending the panel. It's a great industry to be in. If my kids wanted to get in there, I don't know.
June, that was my next question.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
that's the question is, if one of your children do decide to follow you into the industry, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
One piece of advice is know your basics, because basics will differentiate to become successful or having just a job in the industry. That'll be the advice.
for me, it's a wide range of, there's a lot of healthier work environments, and there's some really tough ones. And I think it's finding an environment where you feel comfortable and you feel supported, and you wake up in the morning wanting to go to work. For the longest time, my daughter found that with Danny Meyer's operation.
Right. Okay. Culture.
think for me, if my kids want to go in, great. I'm not going to force them, but I feel I definitely want them to work at least a year as a server. I feel like this world would be a better place if everyone was a server at some point or a dishwasher at least in the restaurant. Yes. But yeah, I think my son, I think is going to be a YouTube star at 11. Has page and he's like getting money, but my daughter, I think she's going to be a really tough but fair. See that.
Interesting. Okay, any questions, please?
Check. That would be great. It's also streaming on YouTube, so still use it.
You guys have any big regrets starting off? The newcomers, like anything you wouldn't do?
So meaning like, do we have any advice for the newcomers what not to do or personal regrets? Personal regrets. I think during my career, there is a couple of career moves that I made based on emotional situation rather than, putting some thoughts into it, immediate pay raise was involved and I had a very bad day with the organization there. Now I look back, it's not that it was a bad decision because now I get to work with Dynex now, but I wonder what would happen if I put my head down and endure that a difficult time, regardless of the stress and so on and so forth. I wonder what would be different today.
I think for me, it would be restaurant 2 was my ego project. Restaurant 1, I started maybe with, boots on the ground financing, 400,000. Back then I took student loans and said I was going to school and used that to open up my restaurant. But in restaurant number 2, we had done really well. I thought I had the golden touch and I spent all this money, hired a top architect, designer, contractor. And in the end, I should have just done it again like I did in restaurant 1. And as I mentioned, not only did I spend this money, but restaurant 2 was my failing concept and I had to switch it around. So it's almost like listen to yourself, trust yourself. And maybe that's advice I still kind of don't take because I made that mistake, not with restaurant 3, but with restaurant 4, but restaurant 5, I'm back to doing it on.
I can't say I really have regrets. I am where I am because of everything I've experienced. Maybe I wouldn't have stayed with my family's business for as long as I did. I was with my family's business for like 12 years. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s before I realized, you know what, it's time for me to go out and not be under the protection of my family. And find out if I really can succeed. And that did make a difference, but no regrets.
Thank you.
So my question is, what are the main or most important market factors you looked at in the early processes of developing your restaurants in terms of location and concept? I know you guys briefly talked about it, but yeah, this market like overall. What were the things that you looked at specifically that you wanted to carry out?
Yeah, I think for me, my first restaurant was Colombian's Pan Latin restaurant. And I just, back in 2005, everyone was doing like, oh, let's put a sombrero on the wall. This is Latin food. And I really wanted something that was fun, vibrant colors, good music, bring that culture there and just really focus on the ambiance. Yes, have good food and good service. Because a lot of people back then in the 2000s really focused on food and service. I think 5 is something that people missed. So I just felt in Park Slope back then, we were considered the wrong side of the tracks of Park Slope because Barclays hadn't been there yet. So just open up in an area that still had this cool factor.
Yeah, from corporate point of stand is that how relevant is the development to the concept that we're carrying today? What leverage, what value does that new concept bring to our current organization? Is that going to jeopardize where we're heading as an organization, or does it add to or does it open up a new pool of clientele? So those are the things we're looking at. Of course, we look at how attractive is the deal, whether it's hotel partnership or lease deal. Does it make sense? We have to work extra hard to increase EBITDA, but those are the things we look at through the case studies and analytics.
I think back to when we opened the first BLT steak. You know, it was very important to us to find a little niche in the market that hadn't been exploited and do it well for us. You know, being a steakhouse, the thought was, you know, most of the good steakhouses at the time, it was great steak, and then you got a really shitty tomato and green salad or with onion and Roquefort cheese dressing. For us, it was all about the sides. It was about the salads. It was about everything around the steak. And the other thing we focused on was the atmosphere. Was we didn't want to be another masculine steakhouse. There were so many out there. So we made conscious decisions where more than 50% of our clientele were women in the beginning, because we had a look that made them feel comfortable. We had a menu that was distinguished us from the rest of the steakhouses. So yeah, you look for those little things that are going to make you stand out, and then you market those and make sure that everyone hears that that's what you're after. They're going to come. Then you got to keep them.
Thank you.
Questions like I was curious about. Well, you said like your second restaurant was sort of like an ego project. So what do you think is like the right motivation in expanding your business as far as like what's motivating you now as you open this fifth business? Like how is the motivation changing?
Sure. I think, well, I'm 47, so I don't want to be doing this in the 50s. So I want to, my motivation right now is, no, what I mean is and what I mean that, I'll take this back because it's different. I'm doing it on myself. It's just myself and another business partner. In the 50s, yeah, I have a group that comes in and has money, but I don't want to be boots on the ground, trying to raise money, trying to make it work, because it is very stressful. But I want to open up as much as I can before I turn 50. I think that's the motivation now. Now, I feel I have a few concepts that work, a few ghost kitchens that work. So I'm in construction now for Restaurant 5. And one thing I learned from COVID, I have a 2,000 square foot space, but guess what? There's no dining room in it. I'm building, the kitchen is going to take up 60% of that space. I have 2 entrances. It's a horseshoe shape. So I'm doing 2 concepts focusing on takeout and delivery because I feel there's a market there. And there's a chance I may move the delivery from all the other restaurants to this location, because now it's like with these drivers picking up food and customers coming in, it's competition at the front door, which is like, how did they get to this? So I feel that's my motivation now, see like what works. And, you know, yes, it's always in the back of our minds. Maybe there is another COVID coming and how can we get better prepared? I hope that answers that.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I say something to that as well? Sorry. You know, a good friend of mine, his family owns Chef's Warehouse, Dairyland. He told me he sat down with Pat Setta, the owner of Spark Steakhouse, one day, and Pat had said to him, feed the classes, eat with the masses. Feed the masses, eat with the classes. So when George is thinking about his ego restaurant, that's this big statement, you know, yeah, I've been there before, but then, you know, later in my career, when we opened an Italian spot, I said, you know what? I want the Italian version of Hillstone, a very successful concept. Has everybody been to Hillstone? I just wanted to do it Italian style. And the idea being, it wasn't about the chef. It wasn't about anything other than speaking to, you know, real people about what they really want to eat on a day-to-day basis and making it the best way you can. And making money. By the time we finished with BLT, our Italian concept was the most profitable concept in our portfolio.
Any questions?
Sorry. Okay. For either of you, where you, maybe from an ideological standpoint, where you see the actual relationship between your purveyors and cost and how that plays into the business model, and I would say your ideology on food.
That's a great question. I think it's an ecosystem we have to sustain as an operator and vendor side. So it is extremely important. It's very important also not to recognize vendor relationships as numbers. yes, it is our responsibility to put in profit into our margin, but value and profit should be two separate things. CEO of Starbucks said once. So vendor relationship, I value it. I encourage everybody who's getting into this business to build that relationship. Because that's gonna stick with you for a long time, just like your resume. And then number second.
Anything
I
to
agree with that.
add?
Yeah, it's very important because everything is so expensive now and everything goes up and you really just have to focus, yes, on the value, but you do have to focus on the numbers, and as my food costs 40% this week, how did it get to that? Are we throwing things out? God forbid, is someone taking it out of the door or are we undercharging? So it's almost like on a weekly basis, you have to look at those numbers, that.
Yeah, and whether it's a Baldor or any meat purveyor, somebody who you have a good enough relationship that'll come to you and say, you know what, these aren't looking great right now. Try this. These are really fabulous. And there's a couple of ways they're being used. And it often works.
Out of all the people you've encountered in your profession, who had the biggest impact on where you are today?
I'd say for me, my first restaurant, my second restaurant boss, I worked at a cafe, but my second restaurant boss was a place, Night of the Cookers in Fort Greene. It was a Black soul food restaurant. I started as a server. I started as a bartender, and the owner is like, I like you. I'm going to make you my first manager. Here are the keys. I'm going to St. Martin for 4 weeks. Call me if there's a fire. So it really was like a crash and burn, and I figured it out. And he really, just the responsibility he entrusted in me, and I flew with it. And I made him so profitable, this and that. And we would try to go in business together, and it unfortunately couldn't work out. He took too long to make it happen, and eventually, set free and everything. But I look back to him, he's definitely the guy.
Yeah, for me, it was somebody who came out of the hotel business. It was Dan Flannery. At the time I knew him, he was working for Ritz-Carlton. We had opened something on Central Park with him. He got us involved in Ritz-Carlton in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and also up in Westchester. But the way he was able to talk to people and the way he was able to rally everyone around him to one common cause, to this day, I've never met anybody that could do it better than him. And now he's the CEO of just switched to another luxury hotel group, but fantastic man.
For me, it was one of my mentors who taught me how to become a multi-unit operator. So the biggest, analogy that he taught me is if I'm on a horse going 60 miles per hour, imagine now you're behind a wagon with 4 horses. How would you control the direction of each horse? You can't do it micro. You have to do it in the back seat and do it carefully. That encourages you to look at a horizon and the direction where you're heading to. So that stuck with me, and that's the point where I was encouraged to go into the business of my own at the time. And he really sparked the fire of me moving up the corporate rank and then stick to the role that I'm in today.
Thank you. I think Hallie had a question.
First is, each of you tell us something interesting you learned about the beverage side of it, something that these guys, the restaurant owners, that they should know that. And the second thing is, how it all has the trend of plant-based or healthier eating changed the menus.
Of course. So, Rick, I think beverage side is a very important element of our industry today. If you look at the mixologists and talented bartenders all around the world, their preparation, their craft is as excellent as some of the talented chefs around the globe, right? So the awareness of each spirit, what it tastes like, what happens when you mix 2 or more, it's taken a very important role in our segment. So as an operator, you definitely have to be mindful of that sector also. In terms of the veganism or the importance of the ingredients of food, what we saw in 2008 during a mortgage crisis, it encouraged a lot of people to stay home and cook at home because they had to preserve income, right? Same thing happened in 2020. We were encouraged to stay at home and start making. So what that did to a lot of marketplaces is that it encouraged the level of knowledge and awareness of the craft go even further in culinary. So back to the vendor conversation, we definitely should not cheat and underestimate the sophistication of our clients or guests, and put emphasis on the quality of the products.
Yeah, I mean, beverage is important. My 3 restaurants in Brooklyn have full liquor licenses. My restaurant in Jersey doesn't, not because of choice, just Jersey has old school liquor laws on the books. And, if you make more profit in beverages. And in 2005, we were at the forefront of doing fresh fruit margaritas, fresh fruit mojitos, and no one really was doing that. And it really, really benefited us. Like, we're known for our mojitos and our margaritas. For, I guess, veganism, I was a vegan in college. I don't know, everyone went through that phase, but in 97, 98, I was a vegan, and it really was hard when you went out to eat to find something to eat. So I made sure when I decided I wanted to open up restaurants, I had to eat meat. So I went back to eating meat, but I made sure my restaurants always had some kind of vegan option. Now, the plant-based stuff that came up, Impossible Meat here and there, I'm still on the fence. I feel like I liked it more a few years ago. Now I feel like it doesn't taste as good, but vegan gringo taco is one of my favorite tacos at one of my Mexican restaurants. So I think it's definitely important for restaurateurs to think about that, chefs to think about that, adding that to your menus because it's at the forefront.
Okay, so Fox runs 60% beverage, 40% food in sales. And if I can tell you what that means to the bottom line, they're basically high-end whiskey bars that serve food. I'm just going to be honest. And the idea of, me paying 3 bartenders on a shift, $15 an hour to create 60% of the revenue, where in the kitchen there's 10 guys and I'm getting food sent back that was overcooked, undercooked, went spoiled in the refrigerator. That whiskey sits on that shelf until it's poured. The profit margin is huge. So I can't speak highly enough about what that means to any program. And if with the steakhouse, even part of your that special marketing piece, it is a really well curated wine list with somebody on the floor that knows, hey, yeah, you can spend $150 on that, but come here, I got a $120 bottle for you. It's going to blow your socks off. So I think it's a huge component. And I do think the same thing about vegan cuisine right now. I think that, my wife's a vegan now. She had my son doing it for about a year. And I think the health benefits from it are terrific. And I fully support it. And I think it helps that door be open to that reservation for 6 people when, what are we going to do with 2 of the people we want to invite to dinner are vegans? Well, guess what? It's not a problem. Come, because we're going to take care of it.
So that's where the margins are. We have a plant-based whiskey bar. That's I think I have time for one more question. I know Haley had one. Do you have a microphone?
Someone who really likes to have a plan and how much that can change with that in this industry. Did you guys ever start out with like a really strong plan other than starting a restaurant? How do you deal with that changing and let that go?
Plan for me, yes, in my 20s, I think I had a plan for the next 40 years. When I turned 30, it definitely got shortened, but understanding what's important to you as a person going into the restaurant business, whether you're opening your own shop or moving up the ranks, understanding what you want to be as a professional. I think that's probably the most important, rather than having micro plans on the way. Make sure you get a good mentor and teacher along the way, because that's going to define your career also, be successful or failure.
Yeah, I think for restaurant one, I had a strong plan of what I wanted to do. And then as we got to 2, 3, 4, it kind of went all over the place, then COVID, but I'm now back with my mentor, a business coach, just helping me with the planning and involving my team. Before it was just one-on-one, but now getting the whole team involved to, see that. And we actually have our first big quarterly plan where I'm sharing numbers with a few members that I normally don't, so that's something we as a business owner give up, give up control. I think at the end of the day, listen, it's your house on the line, it's your kid's livelihood on the line, so it's understandable. But in order to be a little bit more successful and enjoy life and expand, you have to give up control. Same thing. You guys take anything out of it. Be yourself and give up control.
A daily, I mean, a life plan, yeah. Wow. That's a tough question for me. I would say that the most important thing that I'd like to plan on is finding a way to be happy at work all the time. I want to enjoy myself. I don't want it to feel like a job. So I look for ways to create that environment for myself. And I've been fairly successful. Taste a lot of whiskey in the afternoon. So, yeah.
Well, I think we'll end there. I want to thank everyone in the audience for attending. A big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Roll off the table.
Nice. Thank you.